Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. In our reading in the Gospel of Mark, we read a very fascinating story about in the life of Jesus. After the feeding of the 5,000, Jesus goes up on the mountain to pray. His disciples go in a boat, and lo and behold, the winds pick up, and the disciples are struggling uh, to go against the wind and the waves and everything, and they're struggling, and Jesus sees them struggling, and he goes down and he walks on the water, and he makes as though he's going to walk past them, but they spot him, and they think that he's a spirit, they think he's a ghost, and Jesus says, "No, it's me." And he gets into the boat, and the wind immediately stops, and then they're able to make it to shore safely. And this, again, is a very fascinating story. You have Jesus walking on water, once again showing um, his his power, his authority over nature, and not even to mention the fact that he's able to calm the storm as well. But as we look at this story, we can see the progression that took place when it came to Jesus's presence among them, and the ultimate solution to their problem. First off, we saw that Jesus saw them in the boat in the rough waters. And then he goes into the rough waters, not into them, but walks on top of the rough waters. And then he gets in the boat with them. And then they go to shore. This is very similar to how oftentimes we experience Christ in those times when the wind is contrary to us. We sometimes find ourselves in life trying to just keep the boat afloat. We're just trying to traverse across the lake. We're trying to make it through this life, and everything seems to be working against us. And we're, as much as we might paddle, as much as we might try to steer the boat in the right direction, it seems that everything's coming up against us, and we don't seem to be making much progress. Well, whenever we feel we're in those types of situations, the first thing that we can be confident in is that Jesus sees. There's a sense in which he's on the mountain. In other words, he's up in heaven. He's ascended to the right hand of the Father, but that doesn't mean he doesn't see. It doesn't mean that he doesn't see us when we're struggling in the boat. And he knows what we're going through, is what we can learn. But he's not content just to know what we're going through. He also enters into the circumstances with us. Just as he did with them, he walked on the waters. And for us, he might walk into that financial crisis that we have, or he might walk into that relationship problem that we have. He might step into other problems that we have, problems at work or problems with people, and he steps into the situation. He sees it, but then he's compassionate and he steps into the situation. In other words, we can be confident that not only does he see our circumstances, but he's actually in our circumstances. But then also we can realize that he's also a Jesus who gets into the boat. In other words, his very presence resides within us, and that he not only can see from a distance up high what's going on, he's not only present in the circumstances, but he's also residing within us. And that should give us comfort to know that he's nearer to us than the circumstances we find ourselves in. He's nearer to us than the circumstances we find ourselves in. And that should give us a lot of comfort and help. And we could say that even without the calming of the storm, the disciples had already gotten the best thing. They got Jesus in the boat with them. To have the presence of Christ with them was better than having a calm and tranquil lake around them. To have Jesus is better than anything else. And the same thing is true with us. If we can but recognize that Jesus is watching what I'm going through, Jesus is in the circumstance that I find myself in, but he's also residing in me, and his presence is closer to me than this situation that I'm in. That would be enough. We could say, Yeah, that's a wonderful, precious thing to know that Christ is so near us and so close to us in this very wonderful way. But there's also a sense in which he even calms the storms oftentimes in our lives. Now, sometimes we have to ride out the storm, sometimes for particular reasons, in order to accomplish the greater good, he has to let us ride out the storm a bit. But there are also those times when his very presence, the power of his presence, actually helps calm the storm. Whether it's calming the storm in the circumstances or calms the storm within our heart, his presence can do that. And he can lead us safely to the shore. He can safely lead us through this difficult life, through the treacherous waters, to our heavenly shore. And so this story ought to be an encouragement to us. This experience that the disciples had, we can have in a similar way as we experience Christ in our life, actively involved in our life, guiding us through life, and being a wonderful and precious presence in our life to help us in those difficult times. So these are things we can reflect on and think about as we do our reading today. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.